Hey everyone, it's Bobby Sylvester, and this is the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. We're going to have an episode with Christopher Harris talking about polarizing players, and then Tags and I are going to break down our tight end rankings. But first, I want to talk to you about pristineauction.com, where they have signed jerseys, signed helmets, all kinds of goodies. Their website's really easy to use. And please visit their website. Let them know we sent you from Fantasy Pros. We're giving away a signed Melvin Gordon jersey, and we just gave away a signed Amari Cooper jersey to Douglas from North Carolina. If you want to enter for the Melvin Gordon jersey in all future contests, email us at contest@fantasypros.com. Just take a screenshot of your review and subscription on iTunes to our show, and we'll draw a random name out here next week. All right, let's talk some football. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast with Mike Tagliere, and I'm Bobby Sylvester. Tags, I did a Reddit AMA today, and the people love Kevin White. Can you believe that?
Oh, I believe it. You know what, Bobby, you sent out a link yesterday in terms of our listener league that we're going to have. And man, I have looked at some of the replies coming into that, and it is just fantastic. And
Great stuff. Lots of competition.
Yes, they're all coming after you, by the way, Bobby, not me.
Yeah, that's fine. It's just, it's the character that I play where people want to hate me and beat me, and I love it. I just dig it so much. And today we're going to be talking about our tight end rankings. But first, we'll hit up the most polarizing players with Christopher Harris from Harris Football Podcast. You can find him on Twitter at Harris Football. Welcome, Chris.
Hey, what's going on, gentlemen? Thanks for having me on.
I'm happy to be here. Last time Chris was on, I was unable to make it. I had prior things like scheduled. It didn't work out, but I am here. I am ready to talk with Chris. It's going to be a fun show, Bobby.
So, Chris, are we at the point in the season where you've actually peaked at the ADPs yet?
Yes, yay, finally. Yeah, man, that's sort of my shtick, right? I spend the first couple of weeks of August really trying to hone what I think and try not to be swayed by what the market's doing. Just with the idea, like I know that temptation. I know what it's like when it's, you guys do too. You rank every week. Like,
of course,
it's week 11 and you're like, where's everybody on damn Kirk Cousins? Like, am I totally out of the, I don't know. And I just don't like doing that in the preseason. I really want my opinions to be my opinions. But of course, there comes a time mid-August where you need to pay attention to Fantasy Pros. You need to pay attention and start seeing where you are market-wise for when you actually start drafting.
I think that's perfectly reasonable. I'm just not brave enough to do it. So, like, who were the big surprises to you when you looked at it and you're just like, wait a second, this guy's going that high?
Let's see. I'm going to do that show on Monday. We're going to do ADP surprises as a topic on Monday, and I haven't figured out my list yet. I'll say the one that just screamed to mind when you said that. I'm sure there are many others, but Mike Gillislee, I was like, what? Market? What? Like, I'm really surprised that people are willing to just immediately say, oh yeah, that's his job. Like, no question. He's just, take him in the 4th round. We're good. I'm not saying it couldn't work out that way because I like him. I don't think he's special. I worry that the market looks at the short touchdowns, which could really be conveyable to New England, but then also the yards per carry, which, Bobby, I'm not a big fan of yards per carry, and having watched Gillislee's film, I just think it's fake. Like, you take away that Niners game where the Niners had no interest in tackling him, and he's got a very much more reasonable. He's just not that kind of player. It's going to wind up being the Jeremy Hill yards per carry from his rookie year. Like, that's going to go away. He's not a dynamic special player. He could wind up being worth that level of a pick, but I'm surprised that the market isn't factoring in some downside.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting to me, and the reason I say that is because Gillislee was someone I was kind of going through those numbers, and Gillislee faced on 49 of his carries, which was basically 49% of his carries in 2016. He was facing stacked boxes, and on those carries, he averaged 4.2 yards per carry. So it was one of the higher marks in the league, and it's interesting to me though, Chris, because Evan Silva happens to be on the side that you're on, saying, and I believe he's got a bet going on with someone in the industry in regards to how Gillislee will finish this league this season. So I think it's an interesting debate, but I'm with you in the terms of some people willing to draft him as a set it and forget it type running back is like a high end RB2. We've had someone on the show talking about Gillislee as their RB11, and I'm not willing to go there. I still think it's still a Patriots offense, and we have to remember that. Yeah. It's going to be extremely difficult to project these every single week. He's better for best ball though.
So, fellas, we don't have much in the way of news this week, but Joe Thomas is going to miss the next preseason game. I'm starting to wonder, Should we be concerned about Isaiah Crowell? What do you think, Chris?
I don't. That's another. Well, I guess I'm not shocked about Crowell's IDP. I just don't. Sorry, ADP. I don't share it. Let's put. I don't.
Neither do Tags and I. We're with you 100%.
Yeah, I don't. I can't take him. I think he's going as a top 30 overall pick. He's a maybe 20 something. And another player I just don't think is special. And the non-special big backs.
Is he as good as Duke Johnson? I mean, I think Duke Johnson. I watched the film. I think he's more talented.
Yeah, they're different. They do different things, and it's very clear usage-wise the kinds of plays they want to run with, or at least last year, the kinds of plays they wanted to run with Crowell versus the kinds of plays they wanted to run with Duke Johnson. Like anytime they're close, if they're inside the 10-yard line, anything between the tackles is never, ever going to go to Duke Johnson, and that's probably because he doesn't run with a lot of power, and the one thing Crowell really does well is run with power. But my assessment of Crowell on film is that he's kind of just another big guy, and I don't know that I think he moves laterally all that well. And when you're just a quote unquote just a big guy, you can have a great fantasy season, but you're usually not the one driving the bus. Usually sort of along for the ride on a good offense, LeGarrette Blount style. And this is, I'm not going to say Joe Thomas freaks me out, but this is one more potential reason to think that maybe the bus won't be going that fast.
So you had him down on your rankings already, Tags. Are you moving him down more because of this?
I'm not necessarily moving him down yet because I don't know if Thomas is definitely going to miss any serious time. The preseason I'm not too concerned about, especially with a veteran like him. As for Crowell, we talk about it. I'm with you guys in the fact that I don't think he's a special talent at all. Where he's being drafted is a little high for my taste. I think there's a lot of running backs in that range that are high for my taste, just because when you're on a bottom 10 scoring offense like I'm projecting the Browns to be, it's going to be extremely difficult for you to finish as a top 12 running back. So, I get the you want volume with Crowell and you want the great offensive line. The fact of the matter is he's not going to have 20 plus carry games because the Browns are never going to put him in a situation to do that. So by drafting him as the RB12 or the RB13, you're drafting him at his absolute ceiling, in my opinion. Is he a safe RB2? Sure. If he's locked into 15 touches a game, he's going to finish in that RB2 range if he stays healthy. But at the same time, we're looking to get equity with our fantasy picks. So if you're looking at him and a wide receiver, I'm typically going wide receiver in that case. I don't own too much Isaiah Crowell.
Okay, so let's take a look at some polarizing players now. We've got 140 experts from all around the industry who build their rankings through our expert platform. And these are the players that have the most variance among the experts. Besides position battles like Kareem Hunt, Samaje Perine, we also won't cover John Brown and Kevin White because we always talk about them. And last time Chris was on, we chatted about Corey Davis, who Chris loves, I love as well. We won't discuss him again. You can go back and listen to that episode. He may be the single most polarizing player, by the way. But let's start with Lions receiver Kenny Golladay. Chris, is this guy really that great? I mean, everyone had a 5th round price tag on him.
A what round? Oh, a 5th. Oh,
5th round for the NFL draft. Yeah. No, not fantasy.
I was like, wait, is he wearing Amir Abdullah's uniform? What's going on here?
Yeah, you missed that in the ADP too, by the way.
I really did.
Didn't you miss Calvin Johnson reincarnated?
Babytron is what they're calling him, I think. So okay, we're not going to, I don't think any of us are going to lie and say that we're super well versed in Kenny Golladay college tape other than YouTube highlights. I wasn't spending tons of time researching the kid who, transferred back. Where was he originally? He was somewhere originally, and then the coach gets fired. And
nobody knows.
He was at NIU.
NIU was where he graduated from, but he was actually somewhere in, I think maybe Michigan, and I'm forgetting where. Not University of Michigan, but some smaller school. And he got North Dakota. He was at North Dakota, and the coach gets fired, so he transfers to NIU, which is why, by the way, I think he's a 25-year-old rookie. I'm pretty sure this is his age 25 season. So for all you Dynasty owners out there loving Kenny Golladay, be aware. Older kid had to sit out a year.
Yeah.
I don't know. To me, I don't know. It seems like cause celebs in the fantasy world where people just decide that's a name nobody knows. I'm going to make a name for myself by saying he's going to be awesome. When in fact, nobody really knows what he is. People in camp seem to think, oh, wow, super involved in the red zone. Okay, Anquan Bolden's not there anymore, and maybe there is an opportunity, but if you're drafting entirely just based on a rookie's potential situation, I'm somewhat skeptical. From what I could see on film, for whatever it counts in the MAC, I'll say my comparison is maybe like an Alan Hearns type, kind of a very tall but sort of a string beanie type player. I'm not sure I think he's a complete guy, but I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm wrong.
big, strong hands. He goes up against the ball at the highest point. I mean, I like him, but there's got to be holes in this game if everybody in the NFL whiffed on him, right, Tegs?
Well, that's the thing is Galladay. I'm with Chris in that nobody really knows. And Galladay is someone that I tried to go through and watch a lot of tape this offseason in terms of the college players, and there wasn't much stuff on Galladay out there. So yeah, a lot of people are going off of his YouTube highlights. I think this leads me back to my point that I haven't talked about enough on this show. And Chris, I wanted to get your take on it. Marvin Jones. I feel like Marvin Jones has been like the forgotten man in Detroit. Everybody wants to talk about an Amir Abdullah breakout potential. They want to talk about Eric Ebron, Golden Tate going back into the slot, Kenny Galladay breaking out. I think people are forgetting about Marvin Jones. This is the guy that was the number 3 fantasy wide receiver after 6 weeks of the season. And if you recall, that's when Matthew Stafford was really good, because after those first 6 weeks, Matthew Stafford over the final 10 games, there were just 3 games in which he threw 2 touchdowns in. That's it. And he never threw 3 again the rest of the year. There was 7 games with 1 or less over the final 10. So Matthew Stafford fell off, and therefore so did Marvin Jones. I think Marvin Jones might be the player that people are expecting Kenny Galladay to be. Didn't we see glimpses of this at the beginning of last season?
I think that's a pretty good call. I think both of them are not complete receivers. I don't really know about Galladay. I'm kind of assuming that he's not a very complete receiver. Marvin Jones kind of feels like Allen Hurns to me too. They all kind of feel like the tall, relatively slight, good jump ball, potential deep ball, like that might make some plays. I mean, the Marvin Jones thing about that I can't remember, Mike, you said after 6 weeks or something, he was the number whatever. But the fact is, it was really 3 games. And maybe it was 2.5 games. That's sort of cherry picking stats, because what it really came down to is he had 2 massive first weeks. And then after that, they didn't. I'm not going to say he stunk. I'm going to say it's not an offense that's really designed to take advantage of what he can do. It's such a horizontal, throw it behind the line of scrimmage, throw it to everybody but like, how many deep shots a game is Marvin Jones going to get unless they really change philosophically? And that means, I've seen him score 4 touchdowns in a game. I've seen Marvin Jones be a good red zone player. He's a tall kid. So don't rule out the possibility of him outperforming his draft position. That's a really cool call, Mike. I think it could work out. Again, there are touchdowns to be had with Anquan Boldin gone, but he's not physical like Anquan Boldin, and he's not going to run the routes that Anquan Boldin scored on. So I guess paint me saying maybe the market's valuing him about right, but I think it's a cool call to say a little upside there.
Yeah, I kind of forgot about Marvin Jones. Now, my take on Kenny Galladay, if you want a guy who's a red zone threat, who's going to be on the field a lot more, at that same draft range, why not just go get Devin Funchess? We've already seen him do it. He's plenty talented, right, Tegs?
Devin Funchess is my guy. That's like, I've been talking him up all off season, and the preseason week 1, we saw him on the field with the starters, 9 of 9 snaps. This is what we've been waiting for with him. If you go back to last season, Devin Funchess was being drafted as a top 40 wide receiver because people saw glimpses of what he could do in the preseason. And Chris, I've gone through this about Cam Newton and the fact that with the way that the Panthers have built this team around him, it doesn't necessarily suit his skill set. The short dump off throws to Christian McCaffrey, Curtis Samuel, a former running back. But Devin Funchess, over his first 2 seasons in the NFL, has averaged over 15.5 yards per reception. With Ted Ginn gone, I think Funchess best suits what Cam Newton does well, and that's just throw the ball deep. I mean, that's all he can really do. Let's talk about, he's not really an accurate quarterback, but he has a cannon for an arm. So Funchess, he's got the size for the red zone. He's 6'4". We've seen him make, circus catches in the preseason. He has 9 career touchdowns on 121 career targets. So, the ratios are good with him. I think a lot of people are undervaluing him. What's your take on Devin Funchess?
I have Galladay 68 and Funchess 69 in my receiver ranks. So I guess I'm cool with the call. He is more than just a jump ball player. A couple of the touchdowns last year were kind of running like a little inside slant, and he's so big that the defensive back can't get around him. So that's useful. That could be a touchdown maker. I don't know that he really plays much actual wide receiver though. He's really slow, and he just doesn't really run routes, and neither is Kelvin Benjamin, and Kelvin Benjamin gets away with it. So you could say maybe Devin Funchess gets away with it too. I think it's tough to have so many non-technicians in your wide receiving core who just kind of can't get open except unless you throw them a jump ball. So
that's why they got McCaffrey and Samuel, right?
Right, and so I'm not good at saying, I know that the target share is going to be this X percent, because I don't really believe anybody's good at that unless you're in the room and actually talking to the coach. And so I would never say don't draft Devin Funchess because there are other players there. Like, no, if Funchess is ready to score 10 touchdowns, I don't think anyone's going to get away with that. He's a really big body. I guess I don't know that I think he has the skill part of the game enough to say I think he's a threat for more than, 600 or 700 yards.
Yeah. I think he's kind of like a Dante Moncrief light. Like maybe if they traded teams, Funchess would be much more highly regarded, but they're kind of similar players. I know Moncrief's more of an athlete and everything, but they're both big red zone threats, and I think Funchess being way overlooked. Now, I want to talk about two running backs, Chris, Darren McFadden and Thomas Rawls. Now, we know McFadden's going to be starting for the first 4 games. Maybe Elliott wins his appeal.
Can I interrupt you?
That's a good question. It's a good question.
Yeah, I've been asking this of everybody who I talk to. Like, what's the % chance that Alfred Morris gets a significant enough workload that I'm just clutching my head for 7 weeks?
Like maybe they split, or maybe Alfred Morris takes over. Because I think Alfred Morris is every bit as good as Darren McFadden. McFadden's just number 2 on the depth chart, so I just kind of assumed, which is dangerous, right?
I'm really literally asking. I didn't interrupt to be snarky. I'm literally asking, like, isn't there a significant chance that we're just not going to get a clean solution to this?
I don't think so, and I'll say why. I think it comes down to the fact that the Dallas defense is going to be awful. I think this is going back to the Cowboys that they were in 2014, 2015. Last year's Cowboys, nobody expected their defense to be that good, and the players who made it good, the Morris Claibornes, the Barry Churches, those guys, Sean Lee staying healthy up front, those guys staying healthy are what made that defense good. They lost a lot of pieces this offseason. Their defense is going back to what they were, and when they had that bad a defense, they needed their running backs to be pass catchers out of the backfield. And the fact that their slate of cornerbacks are so tough on Dez Bryant, this translates into where do these targets go? Because you're not going to pepper Dez Bryant with 12 targets when he has Patrick Peterson shadowing him, Richard Sherman, guys like this. So they need to be filtered into the running back position, tight end position. I think Jason Witten's been a little undervalued, but for me, it's because Alfred Morris just doesn't have the hands to play the position that they need him to. I think he may be involved in terms of a 5 to 8 carry type deal, but Darren McFadden is a superior pass catcher out of the backfield, and he kind of already showed it with the team, and he's proved it, whereas Alfred Morris never really did anything while with the Cowboys.
So how high would you draft him, Tags? I mean, we've seen people take him in the top 60, and some people have him ranked all the way down at 130, even though they updated their rankings.
It's too high to go in the top 60. Like I've been on record as saying that I think if you go in the 7th or 8th round, I could understand that. I don't know if you can. Do you want to pay the price? Do you want to? If you can get Ezekiel Elliott in the 3rd round, I'm okay with paying an 8th round price tag for Darren McFadden because you're locking up an RB1 value for the entire season for a 3rd and 8th round pick. If you look at it from the standpoint, like let's pretend your fantasy season has started and someone offers you a trade, for Le'Veon Bell, and it's someone that was a 3rd round pick and an 8th round pick, you're most likely going to take that. So for me, I'm okay with it. And I know some people think that drafting Zeke is a dangerous thing and it's a sucker bet and all that. But
in the top of the 2nd, it is. But if he drops to the late 2nd or early 3rd, yeah, you pull the trigger.
That's my point. That's a dead zone in drafts. There's nothing there that I love in drafts right now. It used to be Sammy Watkins, and now with him off to the Rams, I'm not loving him as much. So yeah, I think I'm okay with Zeke in the 3rd round, but it's unlikely he falls there.
What do you think, Chris? Are you going to have any shares of Darren McFadden, or do you think people are just going too crazy on him?
I don't know how you would ever be in a league where the Zeke Elliott owner doesn't reach for Darren McFadden. My rank of Darren McFadden is about what Mike says, like an 8th rounder, and it's probably the least important rank in the history of ranks because you can't take the chance. Like if you're in the 6th round, you have to draft Darren. I think you have to, and then I think and then in the 10th, I think you have to take Alfred Morris. Like you're pot committed, as they say. You cannot risk that some other doofus in your league goes, well, I'll take an RB1 for 7 weeks. Cool. I'm good with this. Like, I think you have to reach.
That's me, by the way. You just called me a doofus in front of like 100,000 people. Thank you, Chris.
100,000 people, huh?
I don't know.
But in all seriousness, though, Darren McFadden, the thing that people are kind of missing about Zeke, and something I missed when it initially happened, is that Zeke's bye week, the Cowboys' bye week, is week 7. So if he does in fact get held down to the 6-game suspension, you're going to be without him until week 8 of your fantasy season. So you need to hit in a lot of other places if you do take Zeke there.
I never do the handcuff game, but I feel like if you are a Zeke owner, you have to do the handcuff. This is the one exception where I'm willing to do it. Now, what do you think about this Seattle backfield move? We've got Thomas Rawls, who's technically the number one, Eddie Lacy, CJ Prosise. I don't want any part of it, but Thomas Rawls is one of the most polarizing players right now.
It's interesting. Like, I don't care what, oh my God, do I not care what Pete Carroll says? Oh my God, do I not care? I don't believe at all for 1 minute that anything's been decided in that backfield. I'm not, if it's nominally Thomas Rawls because he was practicing with the ones and he showed up first for the first exhibition game, I can easily chalk that up to say, well, yeah, Lacy was behind because the ankle surgery wasn't letting him do drills and OTAs and stuff. Like, I don't think anything's been settled, which is a way of saying maybe it is a three-headed monster. I think at the moment I still defer to Lacy, but I'm willing to learn over the next 3 weeks. And if you're going to ask me who I'm going to own the most of those three, I'm actually going to say I did increase Rawls' rank. I'm about where the market is on Rawls, I guess, but the one I'm going to own the most is CJ Prosise because I think he's the best player of the three, to be honest. The problem is he's not, he couldn't stay healthy, and I'm not sure he will stay healthy, but I mean, Eddie Lacy's film is never going to blow anybody away, and Thomas Rawls is a super hardworking physical runner that always gets him hurt, but he's not an extreme athletic talent. But the best moments of CJ Prosise last year, the play against the Saints, the play against the Patriots, the play against the Eagles, and that's the game he got hurt. Those are plays that the other two players can't make.
Is there any chance that Prosise just takes over and becomes a bell cow in this offense? I mean, we all think he's clearly the best running back they have. Why doesn't Pete Carroll use him?
I think it's probably because there are some things about him that are untrustable, both in terms of health and then who knows, right? It's the same question we've been asking ourselves about Seattle running backs that for at least the past couple of years, let's put it that way, that we don't see everything, right? And just some stuff we're never going to know. But I will say to all the good Fantasy Pros listeners, don't listen to anything Pete Carroll says.
That's a good way to put it.
CJ Prosise just got to stay healthy. That's what it comes down to, is that Pete Carroll's biggest gripe with Prosise to this point has been he's always hurt. He was hurt in the training camp last year in the middle of the season. Then he gets hurt. And this offseason, he said, we just need Prosise to stay on the field. And I think he's the guy. I'm with Chris in the fact that he's the one I'm targeting. I've mentioned him as a sleeper in drafts, kind of. I mean, I know he's going around that RB 40 to 45 range, but I think he's the one that the Seattle offense needs. I'd argue that Eddie Lacy and Thomas Rawls, neither of them are going to be extremely effective or consistent enough for me to justify drafting them as an RB2. So, I mean, Rawls is obviously the better value of the two right now, but for me, I'm probably passing on both of them. I'll take Prosise because this offense needs a wide receiver like him, someone who can catch the ball out of the backfield, and Lacy has shown glimpses of it. Rawls hasn't really been a receiver. I just think that Prosise is the most well-rounded back, whereas he can deal with this offensive line, whereas Lacy and Rawls, we saw it last year with Rawls. They may not be able to.
Yeah. So before we move on to the next player, I want to talk about these best ball leagues that playdraft.com is putting on. So Tags, can you tell our listeners a little bit about these best ball leagues?
Yeah, for sure. We've been talking about them, and we're wrapping up the season, guys. So if you haven't joined any best ball leagues, do it now, because we're getting close to the point where the NFL season is going to start and then they're no longer happening. Why? Because they are literally zero maintenance leagues. They're the leagues that you go in, you draft, which is the funnest part of fantasy football. You draft your team and then it automatically does the rest for you. You don't worry about
It's amazing.
No waivers, no trades, no nothing. No worry about who you're playing. It literally just takes the best players you have, fills your starting lineup, and accumulates points every single week. It's some of the funnest things to do. And on top of that, it gives you a good idea as to, where players are being valued right now in drafts and where you can squeeze out some value. So it's great for, your redraft preparation, I guess you should say. Yeah. But best ball leagues are so fun.
And PlayDraft does this better than anybody else. I've been having a blast with their best ball leagues. Tags and I are going to be drafting against listeners every few days. I did 2 of them yesterday against some listeners. So make sure to follow us on Twitter at BobbyFantasyPro and at Mike Tagliere NFL so you know when we're starting one and you can join us. We've also got a promo code for you. If you visit playdraft.com/fantasypros and sign up, you'll be entered into a best ball draft for free. That's playdraft.com/fantasypros. Okay, so the next player is Pierre Garçon for the San Francisco 49ers, and it's really interesting that he's so polarizing because he's like the safe play, and usually those aren't the guys that are polarizing, but last time he was with Kyle Shanahan, he led the league in receptions. A lot of people, I guess, are not realizing this. He's the only guy there in that offense. I mean, I guess you could say maybe Vance McDonald is all right, but he's going like tight end number 25, so this is Pierre Garçon's targets to get, right, Chris?
I mean, I'm pretty sure, Bobby, you interviewed me exactly 1 year ago, and you made the exact same argument for Torrey Smith. So let's, if Jeremy Curley then leads, right? So
I don't remember that. Maybe it's selective memory, but that does not sound like me, Chris.
But fine. But everybody said, hey, there are targets to be had in San Francisco. How's Torrey Smith not? I mean, I don't like him, but how's Torrey Smith not going to be?
You're right. Yeah.
And so I just don't love that argument. I think the argument that goes, well, they're going to stink, but oh, what the heck? There's a lot of targets for that guy. I mean, sometimes it's Kenny Britt, but sometimes it's, Torrey Smith last year had that argument, and
you don't remember those guys because they had horrible seasons, right?
Right,
but there's plenty of them,
right? Or what's his name? Who with the Ravens last year, who's now with the Colts, whose name just flew out of my head.
Kamar Aiken.
Yeah, Kamar Aiken. I mean, it's the exact same argument. Like, well, Steve Smith's hurt, and Brashard Perriman's bad. Sure, Kamar Aiken's a wide receiver 3. There's just a lot of targets there for him, and then boom, there's not. The difference between Pierre Garçon and those other guys, though, is that Garçon's a pro, and he has fantastic hands. So I would think that he should be pretty safe, that he probably won't kill you. But I'm just not really. I mean, if wide receivers on crummy teams who were quote unquote the only guy were such fantasy gold, why do they not lead the league in fantasy points or come close most years? I'm just hesitant. I price him exactly where the market has him. He's a top 100 player for me. He's a borderline top 40 wide receiver for me. So absolutely draft him. For me, he's a wide receiver 3. I would have a hard time saying like, super psyched, Brian Hoyer, let's do it.
I've got him right where his ADP is as well. I'm sorry, not his ADP, his ECR. The experts are a lot higher than the general public on Pierre Garçon, which should tell you a lot. Tags, where do you have Garçon?
Garçon is someone that I've gotten a debate before about, and some people telling me that he has more upside than I actually believe he does. I happen to be kind of in the middle here. The argument is that I do believe he's going to be targeted. I think, relying on Torrey Smith last year was a little bit different because we had never seen him play in an offense for Chip Kelly, whereas Pierre Garçon, we've seen him play for Kyle Shanahan before. They paid him over $15 million this year in order to bring him in. So it was a priority for them when there was other free agents.
That's like Tavon Austin money. That's so much money.
It is a lot of money. But the thing is, like, when you look at Terrell Pryor, when you look at Alshon Jeffrey and the deals that they got, even Kenny Stills, those guys got less money than Pierre Garçon did this year. So they obviously, they made it a priority to bring him in. I think Brian Hoyer's a better quarterback than people give him credit for. I don't think he's that bad. But at the same time, it's very, very limited upside. I think that he's being drafted exactly where he's supposed to be. I think he's a wide receiver 3. I think he's a boring wide receiver 3 where he's not going to give you, I think his upside is 5 touchdowns. I don't think he scores anything more than that. So that's why I'm saying his range of outcomes is so little for me. I don't know how he's that polarizing because, I see him finishing in between that wide receiver 24 and wide receiver 32 mark. It's like that's where he's going to fit in. Nothing more, nothing less. He's not going to win you a league, but he's not going to lose it either.
Let me ask you a question here, Chris, okay? When you watch Brian Hoyer on tape and then you watch Eli Manning on tape, if you were an NFL GM, which quarterback would you rather have leading your team if it was the same team?
Eli. Hoyer's not good.
Okay.
I disagree with you guys. Hoyer's good in very short stretches, but inevitably the limitations get him. He's in the Andy Dalton school of not understanding your limitations. And the moment he starts trying to squeeze it into windows, he's dead. If he's in close games, he's dead. Of course, he has had moments, but all I need to show you is the film from the Kansas City playoff game a couple years ago. It's Eli.
And that's the one that's held against him, though, right? Like, that's the one that's held against Brian
Hoyer.
Mike,
I can hold a lot of games against Brian Hoyer. He's
That's the one that stands out, though, in everybody's mind. It was on national TV. It was a playoff game. I understand that. And Eli, to be fair, he's up and down, but I would actually agree in terms of Eli. I think Bobby hates Eli a little too much, but I would 100%, like, hands down, I would take Brian Hoyer over Blake Bortles every day of the week.
Yeah, I think I probably would too. I've been on
you guys.
Bortles last year, everybody liked. I stayed the same. Bortles, everybody this year, everybody hates. I stay the same. Like, I didn't like him last year. He's not good, but I also think Bortles gives you so much more. It gets your fantasy team and your NFL franchise so much more possibility than Brian Hoyer does. All Hoyer can really do is just hang on for dear life and try, and hopefully you don't get killed. And Bortles is a great athlete, has a much bigger arm. He's totally undisciplined and he's a bad quarterback. But, like, put it this way, neither one of those guys is going to have a job in the NFL starting next year.
Yeah, that's very true. I think so, at least. So Ben Roethlisberger is another guy that is extremely volatile in the rankings. Some people have him in their top 8. Some people have him right around number 20, and he hasn't been a top 17 quarterback for a number of years now, but he has Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown and Martavis Bryant. I mean, what can we expect of him? Should we just pencil him in for 4 or 5 games missed, Chris?
I don't know, I guess. I mean, that's been the reason he doesn't have a top 17 season is because he's been hurt. So you can decide to hold that against him or not. So I will digress here, because the one thing I don't want, if somebody wants to give me the home road argument with Ben Roethlisberger, which I think is a bunch of hooey, then I want somebody to explain why. What's the reason that Roethlisberger is bad, that you think Roethlisberger's incapable, not you, but the mythical, the straw man that I'm bringing into this argument.
Right, no, yeah.
What is the actual, give me a reason, because otherwise it's just a data dive. I'll come up with the defensive end who can't play against left-handed quarterbacks. Like, I will tell you that last year, after Roethlisberger's knee injury, he had 6 road games and 3 home games. And he was like the quarterback 4 or 5 before he got hurt. So, if he was hurt and didn't play as well, or the Steelers didn't give him as much to do, and he had 6 road games and 3 home games, are we going to say that maybe his home numbers are going to wind up looking better than his road? Like, I don't know what...
It's such a small sample size. Like, you can't take 8 games and say, this is the end all. Like, it's going to come back down to earth. I'm with you on that.
And so it's been the past 3 years where the numbers have been better at home than on the road. But I say to that, like, if it's Drew Brees, I get what your explanation is. He plays in a dome. It's different. I mean, there's no, it's a harsh environment to play quarterback in Pittsburgh. And if you flip a coin 3 times and it comes up tails 3 times, does it mean you think all coins are like biased toward tails? Like, it's what you said. It's the small sample size, and it's just going to work out that way. So anyway, I am not accepting that, or who cares what I accept? But I personally don't view that as the reason why you would be anti-Roethlisberger. Bobby, you nailed it, and Mike, I heard you agreeing. It all comes down to health.
Mm-hmm. Yep, 100%. And the one player I want to talk to you, I know we're running out of time here, I wanted to hit on is one player I can't seem to get my mind around, the fact that people hate him so much, and they love, they hate Adrian Peterson, but they love Marshawn Lynch. Is there a difference here? Like, I understand that Lynch is going to be playing behind one of the better offensive lines in football, but Adrian Peterson is going to be playing behind a better offensive line than he has probably his entire career. And
they're both splitting carries, I think.
Well, I mean, yeah, they want to limit Lynch's carries, whereas Peterson obviously is going to be splitting time with Ingram, but they haven't really trusted Ingram on the goal line over the last couple of years. So, Chris, what's your take on Adrian Peterson? Do you think that people are writing him off a little too soon?
I probably feel like it's about fairly valued. But it's a great comparison, because people who just say, because I didn't see Lynch last year and Peterson was hurt and made me mad and I drafted him in the first round, I'm going to be extra.
Yes.
Like, that's a silly reason not to draft someone. That's a
really good point.
But if I'm going to evaluate situations, so as players, I don't know who has more left, because it's just, I haven't seen it. Last year was a total wash for both of them. As situations, I'm going to come down and say that the Oakland situation is pretty significantly better, because both of those 2 little scatbacks, if that's who they're relying on. I mean, as long as he gets Latavius Murray's workload from last year, and therefore double-digit touchdowns are on the table almost by just as long as he's still in the league, that's different for me than Peterson. But, cousin Josh comes on my show, and he makes the point, like, Sean Payton is absolutely the guy who would say, hey, rest of the league, you thought you didn't want to say an Adrian Peterson? Look what I can do, and get him 20 touchdowns. Like, you could absolutely imagine that happening.
That is true. Yeah. And I could also imagine Marshawn Lynch just retiring after week 4 because he feels like it.
Sure. Like,
Adrian Peterson, that's so funny. Adrian Peterson has never played in a season. Like, if he's played 12 or more games, he has scored 10 or more touchdowns. There has never been a season where he's played where he has not scored 10 touchdowns. And granted, it's a different team and all that, but the Saints do produce the most fantasy points at the running back position over the last 5 years.
And I mean, I guess the counter to that is, when he did that all those other seasons that he scored double digits, he wasn't 87 years old. That would be the coming up from major injury.
And on a very bad team. Like, now he's on a good team. That's the difference. I mean, I'm excited to watch Peterson on a semi-decent team. Yeah, for sure.
Chris, I have one more question before we let you go. I have to ask you about Austin Hooper. I know you've watched a lot of tape on him, and he's the most polarizing tight end. Some people love him. Some people think there's no chance this guy's any good. How do you feel about him?
I think the market is way undervaluing the role. And so I'm going to say filmically, I wasn't in love. When Jacob Tamme got hurt last year, they wanted to make Hooper a big part of the game, of the passing game. And it kind of didn't work. He wasn't open all that much, and when he was, he had a couple of drops, and the ball hit him in the helmet one time, and he made catches down the stretch, but it was sort of the safety valve that, anybody could make those kinds of catches. And so I didn't see sort of the Hunter Henry wow factor, but that doesn't mean he doesn't have it. I just didn't see it yet. However, the Super Bowl catch, he's getting interfered with, the touchdown by Pat Chung, and he makes a very sweet catch and shows you that he does have that sort of ceiling. But the role is great. So in this player profile almanac that I do, I give film grades to everybody because I spend all my time watching film. And I also gave grades to situations like A through F for every player's situation, which means basically like everything around them, everything not them. And I believe it was 4 tight ends an A grade for situation. 3 of them are in my top 5 tight ends. One of them is Austin Hooper. It's gold. Like there's no other option there, right? So as much as you don't draft purely based on situation, but pretty good athlete, golden situation, and enough stuff that you don't go, wow, he's automatically going to dominate, but there's something good there. Like, no, I think if you're implying that you think the market's a little low, I'm with you.
Cool. Yeah, I'm totally with you on that. I'm glad I asked the question because that was a great answer. Chris, as always, it was a lot of fun having you on. Glad we got to learn from you and looking forward to chatting with you next time.
Thank you very much. I hope folks will check out the podcast. If you don't know, I do a 5-day-a-week podcast. Am I just a glutton? Do you guys look at that and just go, what are you, a freak?
No, I'm jealous. I want to do 5 days a week. We
would love to do 10 episodes.
Oh no, you wouldn't. Did I just?
Well, I mean, we don't produce our own episodes, so Clinton might not like it, but
No, it's really awesome, and I'm very appreciative that so many folks listen. And if people want to check out harrisfootball.com, I do have this almanac.
It's great.
Almanac for sale, Bobby. I know you've seen a copy, and it took a lot of time to make. It's a 200-page PDF.
Yeah, Chris kills it. He's a great Twitter follow as well. Thanks again, Chris, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thanks, guys.
So we are starting the Listener League, and if you want details about the Listener League, just follow me on Twitter at BobbyFantasyPro, and it is my pinned tweet. So the tweet all the way at the top, it breaks down the league settings, and it's really intense. It's a unique league, but we had so much fun doing it last year, and we're going to make it so that we can get 17 listeners in the league. With me and Tags are going to share a team. Dan Harris, who comes on the podcast every once in a while, so you can try to beat him. You're not beating me in Tags. And then last year's champion, Eli, who just crushed everyone. He'll be back as well. So make sure to submit your entries. It's just 10 words to contest@fantasypros.com and just title it Listener League. Okay, Tag, so let's talk about our tight end rankings here, and then we'll try to get some questions from the listener mailbag. We meant to last show, but we kind of ran out of time and didn't get there. So we'll kind of speed along here through the tight ends. I think everybody in the world thinks that Rob Gronkowski has a tier all to himself. Just how high are you willing to draft him, Tags?
He does have a tier to himself, and it's hard to dispute taking him in the second round because you never want to assume injuries, right? I always tend to bet against injury bugs. So Rob Gronkowski for me is an end of the second round, beginning of the third round pick because at that point you're fine with the risk because if you get 12 games out of him, you're going to be more than happy. So I think he's there, and honestly, Travis Kelce is someone who I had to think about twice and whether or not he belongs towards that tier or not. He was someone that over the first 38 games of his career, he averaged just 5.9 targets per game. He wasn't scoring many touchdowns. They finally figured out how to use him in Kansas City. Over the final 10 games of 2016, he averaged 8.2 targets per game, which would go up over 130 for the season. So that's massive.
That's almost as good as Kevin White.
almost as good as Kevin White. So, but no, seriously, like Travis Kelce, I think he deserves to be in that conversation with Jeremy Maclin missing a lot of time. Travis Kelce was a dominant tight end. The question is, can Alex Smith support someone who should be in that Gronk tier? My answer is no, but at the same time, I think Travis Kelce has a tier to his own right behind Rob Gronkowski.
That's what I was going to say as well. I think it's kind of crazy to talk about him in the same tier as Gronk because when Gronk's healthy, he is always a top 12 VBD player. I don't think Kelce will ever be close to that, but I do consider him to have the tier 2 all to himself. I love Greg Olsen. He's safe. Jordan Reed, not touching him because of the health issues. I mean, if he is healthy, he's probably 90% of what Gronk is. I think he might be better than Travis Kelce. It's definitely a better fit in the offense because it doesn't have Alex Smith throwing to him. But with Gronkowski, I mean, you think about these running backs, and the top 12 running backs every single year, 25 to 35% of them are hurt. And so you have to think that any running back, whether it be Melvin Gordon or LaShawn McCoy, has just as much of a chance to get hurt as Gronkowski, who's brittle as far as tight ends go, but running backs are the ultimate brittle position.
They are, for sure. But I mean, when you're talking about a tight end position, these guys aren't scoring as much as the running backs and wide receivers are. You're drafting those guys at that position because you know they're in a lock for touches, and they're going to outscore the tight ends. Like, they're even going to outscore Rob Gronkowski the majority of the time. But the reason that Gronk is there is because his value over replacement, right? Because tight end is the most volatile position in all of fantasy football. It's the most difficult thing to judge week in, week out. You basically finish as a top 12 tight end by scoring a touchdown. So we're playing in a touchdown-only league. I mean, is that what it comes down to? And it is when it comes to tight ends a lot of the time. So when you find a tight end who's seeing 8+ targets per game, they're very highly coveted, and they should be. And Jordan Reed, though, my argument against Reed, though, is not only his injuries, but the fact that this team has more red zone options than they've ever had. You know, with Terrell Pryor there, with Josh Doxson there, Jordan Reed was the only guy scoring touchdowns. So for me, I wouldn't even argue that when he's on the field now. I don't even think when he's on the field that he's 90% of Gronk. I think he fits in that tier with Greg Olsen when healthy. But I think you can make the argument that he belongs down in that tier with Tyler Eifert, because he's another one injured a lot, but when they're on the field, they produce.
So I like Reed more than Olsen if we know Reed's healthy. And like I said, I think I might like him more than Kelsey too. With that being said, I've got him quite a bit behind Greg Olsen. And maybe I'm thinking about moving Jimmy Graham ahead of him. Do you like Tyler Eifert more than Jimmy Graham?
I do when he's on the field, if we can guarantee that, because, you know, Tyler Eifert, he's only played 21 games the last 2 seasons. He has scored 18 touchdowns in those 21 games. Like,
that's amazing.
That's a solid sample size, right? He's only been targeted 121 times, so that's obviously an issue. But the thing is, when we have him and AJ Green on the field together, does that production dip? Because these two have kind of alternated with injuries, missing time. So I have my concerns about Eifert, but at the same time, we know that he is the go-to guy in the red zone for the Bengals. Like, there's no doubt about it. He's Gronk-esque in terms of in the red zone. The problem is that he doesn't total the yardage that Gronk does. So when you have someone scoring almost a touchdown a game over the last 2 years, he's got to be in your top 8 tight ends, right?
Absolutely, yeah. After Jimmy Graham and Tyler Eifert, I think there's a pretty substantial drop-off. I know Kyle Rudolph led all tight ends in targets last year, but they've got some weapons this year. I think their offense is going to look a little bit different. He is my number 8 tight end. I mean, after Eifert and Graham, you've got Rudolph, Delaney Walker, Martellus Bennett, Zach Ertz, who I'm moving way up my list, Eric Ebron, Hunter Henry, Jack Doyle, Kobe Fleener. I think all of them are very similar in value. What do you think?
My tier included Tyler Eifert, Martellus Bennett is my number 6 guy, Kyle Rudolph, Jimmy Graham, Jack Doyle, and Delaney Walker. And that's where that tier ends for me, because you're talking about a bunch of guys that we know when they're on the field that they're producing. Like, they're in that tight end 1 conversation. Tight ends miss a lot of games too, whereas that's where that tier is so big. But they're proven guys. They've been there, they've done it. We know that. Whereas the next tier, for me, it comes down to Ebron, Hunter Henry, and Zach Ertz. And those are the guys who, if you want upside,
I like those 3 more than all the guys you mentioned.
Exactly. Well, that's the thing.
But it's about the upside to me. I could see Zach Ertz or Eric Ebron or Hunter Henry finishing as a top 3 tight end this year.
Correct. And that's the thing. It all depends on the drafter you are. We know that you're a risky drafter. We know that you like Kevin White, for example. So by the fact that you like this tier, it just tells you what kind of drafter you are. And honestly, it comes down to your team construction. So just because I have Eric Ebron, Hunter Henry behind guys like Jack Doyle or Jimmy Graham, that doesn't mean that you can't take them over them if you want to take on that risk. You just make sure that you have some consistency on the rest of your roster, maybe like a Demaryius Thomas or something like that, where you can take on that risk at a risky position, right? And you could deal with the ups and downs. But if you're looking for stability at the tight end position, which is what I often do, I'm leaning with the guys in the tier above. And I think Martellus Bennett is the one in that tier that I'm ending up on with more of my teams than I thought I would. Because, Bobby, the Packers don't sign players in free agency. That's just not what they do. So when you see them go out and get a big name free agent like Martellus Bennett, it's big news.
And don't forget, Martellus Bennett was a top 3 tight end just 2 years ago, and he was hurt last year and still produced as a backup tight end.
Yeah, not just that, but last year he was there were only 2 tight ends that finished inside the top 18 tight ends with fewer than 75 targets. Him and Hunter Henry. But Martellus Bennett finished all the way up at number 7 with 73 targets. And going from Tom Brady to Aaron Rodgers, Dare I say that he gets an upgrade at the quarterback position?
You can say that. I'm not going to argue with you. Now, we're going to get a lot of heat, and probably me more because everyone knows that I'm a lot lower on Tom Brady. But, so thanks for bringing that up, getting me in trouble.
No problem.
So you haven't mentioned Coby Fleener yet, and he's actually a guy that I love. I'm toying with the idea of putting him ahead of Delanie Walker. I know Walker's got so many targets, but now they got Eric Decker, Corey Davis. They've got Derrick Henry and DeMarco Murray's mouths to feed too. Delanie Walker's getting really old. And Coby Fleener was a top 12 tight end last year. He was very good in the second half. And right now his ADP is number 16 among tight ends. I see no way, unless he gets hurt, that he finishes outside the top 12. I think he's probably a top 10 guy this year.
Well, the problem for me, and I'm not against Fleener. I think a lot of people have kind of forgotten about him. They don't want to touch him because of how bad he was. He was very up and down last year. He had a couple weeks that made his entire season, and that's why he finished top 12, but he still did, right? And we know tight end's a volatile position, so for him to finish top 12, it is what it is. But for me, the reason that I have him in the tier below the guys like Ebron, Henry, and Ertz is because, like, how much respect did he lose? Like, how much targets do they take away from him, considering how bad he was? Like, he was not good with the targets he got. Did he develop some chemistry with Breeze this offseason? I hope so. And that's the thing. That's why, again, he's another upside piece. He's just outside that tier. But for me, he's more of that streaming tight end where it's like you want to get a grip on him before you start using him every week. Whereas like the guys above him, those are guys that I wouldn't hesitate to stick in my lineup every week. And
I think that's fair.
And that's what tight ends comes down to, right? Like, I like Jason Witten. I think he's boring, sure. But it's like, how do we put him ahead of some of these other guys? And that's the thing is, when you want consistency, that's so vital at the tight end position. But again, if you have consistency everywhere else and you want upside, you can argue that Fleener, he arguably has top 5 upside.
Yeah, I think you're right there. Now, you mentioned Jason Witten. I like him too. The only other two guys besides Witten that I'd consider owning are Cameron Brate and Austin Hooper. That's in a standard 12-team league. I mean, if you're deeper, obviously, you can own more tight ends than that. But Cameron Brate was among the most efficient tight ends last year. I know they got O.J. Howard, but this guy was so good when Jameis Winston threw him the ball. I can't imagine he's not on the field. I think he has substantial upside too. And then Austin Hooper, who we already talked about with Chris, me and Chris are big fans of him, and I like Hooper more than Witten. I'm probably not going to start him every week, but he's a guy with enough upside that, I'm never for owning a backup tight end, but if you want to get Hunter Henry and Austin Hooper, I bet you one of them turns out.
Well, that's the thing. Austin Hooper, he's one that it's difficult to rank, right? And to be honest about it, Steve Sarkisian, he's a first-time offensive coordinator, in the NFL. We don't know how he's going to call the offense. Austin Hooper didn't do much last year, but he was a rookie. We've kind of learned not to trust rookie tight ends.
Rookie tight ends, not good.
Exactly. So he's a very difficult one to rank, but can I put him confidently above Jason Witten? No, I can't. And that's why Austin Hooper, he's another one of those guys where it's like, how do I move him up my charts? I understand the upside there, but at the same time, it's all based on hype, and we have nothing to go off with Hooper except a very, very small rookie sample. Another guy in that tier I think you missed is Julius Thomas. He's one
not for me. I did not miss him. It was intentional.
So here's the thing. I'm not a Julius Thomas fan. I think that he was overrated. I think that Peyton Manning made this guy's career, but at the same time, he's going back to Adam Gase and he's playing with Jay Cutler. Jay Cutler has traditionally targeted his tight end quite a bit. When Julius Thomas is on the field, I think you could play him in matchups that the Dolphins are going to throw a little bit more, like ones they're projected to lose. Like, let's pretend that Miami's going up against New England. I think Julius Thomas is an excellent streaming option in that matchup. So I think he belongs there. I wouldn't touch Cameron Brate. I have Cameron Brate down at number 24 among tight ends. And it's not because I love O.J. Howard. It's just because I think they share time between those two. And I think they kind of cancel each other out, and that it's a very non-productive position for the Bucs this year. I think Deshaun Jackson and Mike Evans are going to dominate the targets there. Like, those are... I
agree. That is probably the case. And the reason that I like him more than Jason Witten is because you know what you're getting with Jason Witten. He's going to be about the tight end 15. That's not someone I really want on my team. I mean, he's not startable every week. I would rather take the high upside, and maybe, just maybe, Cameron Brate's a top 7 or 8 tight end. Maybe Austin Hooper is a top 5 or 6 tight end. And if he's not, so what? I cut him. But Jason Witten, you just put him on your bench and he's kind of mediocre and never really helping you. So I would rather own those guys. I think Witten will probably finish with more points than both of them, but just because of the upside, I'm more willing to draft Hooper and Brate. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. That makes plenty of sense. And, one player who, I wanted to write off this year, and the more I think about it, the more I'm like, why am I doing this? Why? Antonio Gates wouldn't come back for another season if he wasn't going to be involved in the Chargers' plans. And
you're right. He's a streamer for me, going for that touchdown. I like him and Fedorowicz in that role.
Yeah, and that's the thing. So Gates for me, it's just like I'm teetering with him and that Julius Thomas. I think he's in that conversation, but he's going as like the tight end 23 right now, which is just, it's kind of crazy. I think that you could definitely do much worse than Antonio Gates.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, Tags, give me one more name, someone who's like a super sleeper. Like if you play in one of these 2 tight end leagues and you need to pick someone a lot later, who's a guy with upside that you'd like to own here?
Austin Seferian-Jenkins is a name that I would definitely keep on your radar. I don't think you need to draft him.
Huge ceiling.
Because I don't think people are going to be running to the waiver wire if he has a decent week. He's actually suspended to start the season, so I take that back. You don't need to draft him, but when you look at the Jets and the fact that they're going to be such a bad team, right? They're going to be down. They're going to have a lot of pass attempts. We don't know who those pass attempts are going to be coming from, but Seferian-Jenkins is a guy that was drafted as a top 8 dynasty tight end just a couple of years ago. The thing that changed is, he was cut by the Bucs because he was dealing with some inner demons. He had some drinking issues. Apparently, he's kind of turned his life around. The Jets are impressed, and they really have nowhere else to go here. Like when you go through projections for the Jets, it's gross. So Seferian-Jenkins could almost like walk into 80 targets in this offense, and they do have a new offensive coordinator, by the way, and it's one of the old offensive coaches from the Saints. So the Saints are a team that uses their tight end. It's possible that we kind of tie the string there, but I think Austin Seferian-Jenkins, if he's someone that gets off to a hot start after he deals with I think it's a 1-game suspension.
2 games, yeah.
Is it 2 games? So that's the thing. So once he gets past that, I think he's someone that you probably could pick up in like an anticipation if you have like a dead spot on your bench and just say, if he turns into something great, because the talent is there.
Yeah, I'm with you. He was the name I was going to use, and big old ceiling. Every single year there's someone who starts in the ADP top 20 or top 30 that explodes onto the scene and is a top 8 tight end. It's probably going to happen with one of these guys. I think he has the best chance to be that guy. Other guys that come to mind, Eric Swoop.
He just had knee surgery. It's a good conversation. We should mention that, is that Eric Swoop just had his knee surgery the other day, which obviously further raises Jack Doyle in my rankings.
I thought it was like end of the season thing when you said that. I was like, how did I miss that? He's questionable for week 1. So not a big knee surgery.
I don't think they anticipate him playing for at least 6 weeks. So I think he's going to miss the first couple weeks of the season. But a name real quick, Bobby, before we move on, Zach Miller of the Bears.
Yes.
If he's still on the Bears team, now he's been discussed as a cut candidate, and if he gets cut, obviously Adam Shaheen is going to move up the rankings. He's a rookie tight end, though. So if Zach Miller sticks on this roster, they are going to use him. And
he's a playmaker, Tags. I like Zach Miller.
He was one of the most targeted tight ends in football before he got hurt last year. So, I mean, he's someone that should definitely move up your list if he sticks with the Bears.
My other player is Vance McDonald. I know his ECR right now is number 34, but we talked about it with Chris. Like, somebody's going to get targets in San Francisco. Who knows who it's going to be? I think it's probably going to be Garcon because, the Kyle Shanahan connection and everything, but maybe it'll be Vance McDonald. I was pretty impressed when I watched his film. He's not like a world beater or anything, but maybe it's like a Gary Barnidge situation with the Browns a couple years back where nobody else is there, so someone just has to get the targets, and it's Vance McDonald.
That's so weird, Bobby, is because you and I'm with you. I own Vance McDonald in a couple dynasty leagues, and I thought he looked really good in parts of last year, and then all off season, I wanted to take it. I was listening because I don't know much about the situation, and I can't say I know much about Vance McDonald's talent level, but he played really well, and all we heard this offseason was that they're going to cut him. They're going to trade him. They're trying to do this, and he's got a big contract. And all the reports we heard about Carlos Hyde were BS this offseason. So what does that tell us about Vance McDonald? We don't know, and that's the thing.
Yeah.
I really want to see the San Francisco 49ers in their 3rd preseason game because I want to see how Vance McDonald is doing, if he's getting snaps with the first-team offense, because I'm not really buying into the whole George Kittle is their starting tight end because he's a rookie. So, yeah, I actually think I agree with you in the fact that Vance McDonald is a name that should be monitored.
I mean, in a deeper league, if you're going to take a shot on someone, it's better him than someone like, I don't know. I can't even think of anyone that's just a mediocre tight end because I don't care. I don't want those guys. I want someone with some upside, and it's Vance McDonald. Yes, exactly. So let's move on over to the listener mailbag. It's mailbag@fantasypros.com. Please keep them short. If you're writing like paragraphs, we get so many of these every day that, we'll do our best to find the question and respond, but like, if you want to get on the podcast, there's no chance we're going to be able to read a long one. So anyway, the first one is from Dakota in Iowa, and it's a strategy question. He says he's been basing his decisions on a team's offensive line. Is this a good strategy? Like, for example, he's been drafting Kenny Britt because the Browns have a great offensive line over someone who has average offensive lines.
Don't pay attention to it with wide receivers. Like with wide receivers, you should care less about the offensive line.
Agree.
Honestly, you should care more about the running backs and the offensive lines. I did an article actually this offseason ranking the offensive lines and explaining what the impact it has on the passing game. So you should care more about how much that team is projected to score more than you should care about their offensive line.
Yeah, I think for running backs, it matters a ton. Like LeGarrette Blount is underrated right now. He was a top 8 running back last year. Even if he takes a big step backward, I mean, he's moving to a better offensive line, not a better scheme. It's way backwards on the scheme. But even if he goes backwards quite a bit, his ADP right now is like number 27. Maybe he drops to number 18. That'd be a huge drop off, but that's still way above his ADP value.
Yeah, I've been on record as saying it's possible that I'm too low on LeGarrette Blount, but I just don't believe in the talent there. Where I think it's going to be a mess in that Philly backfield, where it's going to be
he might be
the
the fourth best running back in that backfield. I think he's the starter though.
I agree that he probably is the starter, but I think it's a timeshare, and I don't know how many games that we can project Philadelphia just to be like able to pound the ball over and over and over again. So I mean, it's something to watch, and like I said, it's very possible that I'm just too low on him.
Yeah, their defensive front seven in Philadelphia, I think it's one of the best 2 or 3 in the NFL. So I think that's actually what they want to do is pound the ball, keep the ball out of Carson Wentz's hands. And we'll see if that happens. But either way, I'm taking Blount at his ADP. Next question from Chris in Colorado. It's a quick keeper question. I don't like to ask these on the podcast, but there's a lot here to this one, okay? Ajayi in the 13th, Michael Thomas in the 12th. Which of these would you go with?
Michael Thomas for sure. I've been stating all offseason that Michael Thomas is arguably one of the safest wide receivers outside the top 3. Like once you get outside Antonio Brown,
I think Ajayi might be better for this year, but just because of his knee issues and Thomas, like these wide receivers last a long time, you can keep Thomas for 6-7 years at that price.
I would take Thomas a full half a round like before I would take Jay Ajayi in a regular redraft. So Michael Thomas is my pick, and you would keep him for years to come. Yeah, don't be worried about Michael Thomas. Like the only time you worry about Michael Thomas is if Drew Brees retires. Then it's obviously time to worry.
Yeah. Okay. At Jay Horlick 2, in a league with 2 starting quarterbacks, which rounds should the first quarterback be taken?
This is a great question. Like a lot of people are starting to dive into 2 quarterback leagues, and they're afraid to, right? I know me myself, the first time I got into a 2 quarterback league, I felt so unprepared because it's a different animal, right? But quarterbacks, like honestly, once you get outside that elite tier, you could talk about taking Aaron Rodgers as the 6th player off the board. That's when he should go. And in the first 2 rounds, you're probably talking 5 quarterbacks off the board, right?
I'd say 6 or 7.
You could say yes, and it depends on the league, right? Because if you play in, analyst leagues like we do, you'll see quarterbacks last
3.
a little bit longer. But yeah, and that's the truth of the matter. You don't want to be stuck. If you're playing in a super flex league, it's not as intimidating because in super flex, you can get by with 2 quarterbacks, right? If you're playing in a 2 quarterback league, a legit 2 quarterback, not a super flex, you need to draft 3 quarterbacks. So if it's 2 quarterback, I would argue that you should have 2 of your quarterbacks in the first 3 rounds.
Wow. That's I don't know if I would go that far because I think you can get like an Andy Dalton and a Matthew Stafford, which is a great combination as far as I'm concerned. And then maybe a Jared Goff. Like, I can't believe I'm saying draft Jared Goff, but we know he's going to be the starter for 16 weeks. And he has McVay. Like, I think there's some upside there. They added Andrew Whitworth, Sammy Watkins. I mean, they've got 4 top 10 picks and skill players in their offense.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Jared Goff has some upside, and he's also safe. So that's what I would do. I would target Matthew Stafford, Andy Dalton, and Jared Goff and let those be my 3 guys, just 3 guys that are consistent. You know what you're going to get, and it's not going to kill you. You don't have to draft them in the first 3 rounds, but you might have to draft Stafford and Dalton back-to-back in 4 and 5 or rounds 5 and 6 in a league like that.
Yeah, I doubt they even last that long, but the best part of this is that you can go and practice it in the Draft Wizard. Like, it's legitimately a tool. It takes 5 minutes to go through a draft, and you could look at your team afterwards and be like, wow, I waited till rounds 4 and 5 to take my quarterbacks and my team looks like crap. Or you might be like, I want to take quarterbacks early and see how the rest of my roster looks. So it's a fantastic tool. It takes 5 minutes to do a draft. It's so awesome.
It is beautiful. And we reworked the algorithm for that this year. It's more realistic in terms of where quarterbacks are being taken in 2 QB leagues. It's just perfect practice. And, we did a mock draft show for 2 QBs, and I hadn't practiced much before that show because I wanted to get real perspective and see what it was like doing it so we could all learn from it. I waited on quarterback, and I ended up with Alex Smith and Trevor Siemian. Do you remember how bad that was, Tags?
I do.
Practice. Please practice on Draft Wizard before you do your draft, whether it's a 2 QB draft or anything else. It is just such a big help. I mean, you can roll through 4 of these bad boys over your lunch break. You can get 20 of them done using 2 from every single draft position by the time your draft starts. And it won't seem like you wasted a lot of time. It's like the same amount of time to do 10 mock drafts on Draft Wizard than it is to go to one of these other sites and do a mock draft against real people. I mean, our mock drafts on Draft Wizard are against the experts' rankings, and it changes every single time. It is perfect practice.
Yeah, you could do a mock draft in faster than it takes my son to eat a White Castle cheeseburger. But seriously, Bobby, I wanted to tell our listeners about the bet that we have between you and I. Bobby sent me the other day. He sent me the Big 10, right? These are 10 players that we've disagreed on his side, and then I'm going to go through the 10 players on my side, like our guys. And Bobby made the bet with me. It's going to be funny. So you guys might be involved in this somehow, like at least seeing the outcome. Do you want to explain to them what the terms are here?
Yeah, so basically what's going to happen is whoever is right on the most players, and that's going to be subjective based on my opinion. So basically, no, I'm just kidding. We'll figure out something before the season starts on what exactly the ground rules are. But the loser has to film themselves doing the combine.
That's going to be so cool. I hope I don't lose, because if I lose, I'm going to look like an old man trying to do the combine. I'm not old, I'm 34, but it's not going to look pretty.
I'm really nervous. If I do lose, I'm nervous for you because you might have to get a new co-host because they're probably going to hire me. Someone in the NFL is going to say, look how fast that guy is. We need another running back. I don't know. Maybe I'll sign with the Eagles and play behind that offensive line.
So you could dislocate your arm and miss some more time.
Yeah, I dislocated my hip in high school. It was a gruesome injury.
He's injury prone.
That's the last time I ever played football.
Yeah, don't sign him. He's injury prone, guys.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, we have one final question before we end this, and it's about deep leagues, okay? So it's a league where you've got 2 flex and you start 9 players. What do you do in deep leagues? Does your roster construction strategy change here, Tags?
No, honestly, and I prefer the deeper leagues. I think I love it.
Me too.
If I could have 4 flex spots and then on top of the 3 wide receivers and 2 running backs, I would do that because I believe
let the best man or woman win. That's the way to go.
Yes. It comes down to less injuries, more skill, more how deep your roster is. So honestly, in those type of leagues, depending on if it's 12, 14 teams, if it's 12 team, 1 quarterback, draft as many running backs and wide receivers as you can, like throughout the first 10 rounds. Get them all out of the way. Be okay with taking a quarterback like Andy Dalton to lead your team because you're going to be stacked everywhere else, and everybody else is they're going to be looking to start guys like, I don't know, Thomas Rawls or something like that in their RB2 spot, and you're going to be sitting there pretty starting Duke Johnson in your second flex spot. You know what I mean? So just go for depth, take the value. And I preach that all the time is I want to be known for team no strategy. I'm with you on that, but I do apply a little bit of a different twist in these leagues where they're deeper because it's so much about depth. I'm always going for upside, and maybe this just makes me more normal in these leagues because I'm always going for upside. But in these leagues, I like to get more reliable players. I'll draft a Frank Gore, maybe 5-10 spots higher than I otherwise would. LeGarrette Blount, Pierre Garcon, Duke Johnson. I even think Robbie Anderson's kind of in this category now. If you're having a really deep team, Robbie Anderson's probably going to end up with 6-7 targets every single week. And you can get him extremely late. He's someone I think you can rely on as a third flex in one of these leagues. So that's what I do is I draft more reliable players in these leagues, but that's really the only thing I'm changing. I'm still just going for value. Yeah, no, for sure. And I think that's a good point, Bobby, is anytime we do our mock draft episodes, you and I talk about it, is our bench is always filled with upside guys. They're not guys that we're going to rely on from week 1, but they're guys that could potentially be a league winner. Whereas in leagues like that, you do have to take a little more safety because these guys are going to be starting for you and you can't necessarily deal with the ups and downs of them on your bench. So I think that's a great point.
All right, Tags. Well, that's all we have for the show. For those of you listening at home, we've got another episode coming up this week. And maybe an emergency podcast if something crazy happens again like we did last week. We have 3 more great ones coming up next week, including Sean Corner, who is always the most accurate expert. That guy is just amazing, and we're going to pick his brain on some sleepers. It's going to be a lot of fun. I want to say thank you again to the sponsors of today's show, Pristine Auction and playdraft.com/fantasypros for the promo code there. Remember to get your entries in for the contest for the Melvin Gordon signed Pristine Auction jersey, and also your entries for the Listener League at contest@fantasypros.com. You can find the details on my Twitter at BobbyFantasyPro. For Mike Tagliere, I'm Bobby Sylvester. Thanks for listening and enjoy your football.
I just wanted you to watch me dissolve.